What's your staying at a cheap hotel horror story? A friend and I were passing through St. Louis and needed a place to stay for the night, but all the hotels in St. Louis proper were either booked or super expensive. We found one in East St. Louis, not realizing it is the shadiest place on earth. Strip clubs on either side. Entire building smelled like burnt rubber, crack smoke. Tried to open the window to get some fresh air and the guy at the lobby started yelling at us to close it for some reason. Turned on the TV and it was just straight up pee on the first channel. Friend was reaching behind the bed to get to the outlet to charge his phone and ended up with a handful of CM rags. Then to top it off, when we checked out in the morning, the guy tried to say we owed him $10 for stealing the TV remote. Moral of the story, St. Louis and East St. Louis are very different places. Do not make the same mistake. No crap, you had me right up until you said East St. Louis lol. People with flat tires in the highway just ride on the rims and then the rotors to keep from having to get off the freeway in ESL. My first trip to Vietnam I stayed in a bunch of cheap hotels while traveling. Cheap as in $10 per night cheap. The worst by far was a room that was absolutely covered in mosquitoes with no nets around the beds. So as soon as you lay down you could see hundreds of mosquitoes ready to feast on your skin. I ended up spraying myself and my sheets with DEET and sleeping with the covers over my head. Me too. The worst one I stayed at was in Hanoi. It was basically an enterprising person's attic with some mattresses thrown down. There were big black rats there. Will never forget when I had to leave at about 4 AM to catch a bus. I was trying to negotiate ladder steep stairs with a rucksack on my back. Looked up to see these enormous fat black rats balancing on a beam just above my head. I'm a compulsive road tripper and I've stayed at a ton of cheap motels. By a wide margin the most disgusting one I visited was a Motel 6 south of downtown Salt Lake City. It was clearly a motel for prostitution. Out west this isn't that unusual for a Motel 6 in a city, but trust me when I say this was by far the worst. Our room smelled so bad of smoke that my skin felt like it was frying. It was a non-smoking room with ashtrays, cigarette holes burned into the bed sheets, goop and various body fluid stains on the bathroom ceiling, walls, and floor. A used needle was still in the trash can. No towels in the room. You had to request them from the front desk and they'd give you a once-over before clearing you as worthy of cotton. Pimps were out in the parking lot all night blasting music and fighting while showing girls to various rooms. The Yelp page for this place has a picture of emergency response peeps taking care of a dead body. We found the only room in town, but the service was lousy. Maids wouldn't enter the room and just left towels outside the door. Turns out that the last maid who entered the room was murdered there a week before we arrived. Well, that's a bit understandable. Detroit midsummer with no aircon, so we had to sleep with the window open on the ground floor. Somebody tried to break down the door about 2 AM. Screaming came from the corridor randomly all night. Bedside light bulb was broken, just jagged bits of glass sticking out. Coffee machine actually exploded, with sparks from the wall plug and all, but weirdly the room was sparkling clean. Stayed a cheap hotel in London donkeys back. Was traveling and met up with a couple of mates doing their own travels. The room was 2 single beds, and being the only guy I volunteered to sleep on the floor between the beds. I was the only one to escape the worst case of bedbugs I've ever seen. I don't know how they weren't in the carpet as well. The girls were covered head to toe. Crap was nasty, yo. Apparently, bedbugs don't like everyone. I slept in the same bed as someone and they got bitten head to toe. I didn't get one bite. It's possible that you're revolting to bedbugs. It was $15. The floor was squishy, my pillow had small blood stains on it, and there were burn marks in the sheets. We told the main guy about it and he said, well, you already paid, so tough luck. The handyman was nice and kinda told him off, saying we should at least get a room that doesn't have a wet carpet. But we ended up staying in that room due to the owner being stubborn. Really should have slept in the car that night. Pillow had small blood stains on it. Bedbugs. Was on a few week-long college school trip in northern Florida a few years back. Stayed at a very shady roadway in where you had to ask for towels at the front. The key cards weren't keyed to specific rooms and there were several instances where other patrons walked in on a bunch of college students accidentally thinking it was their room. The worst part was at around 1-2 am the people I was sharing the room with and I were awoken by a woman screaming bloody murder and pounding on the wall next door. She screamed, "Help, he's going to kill me, and please dear God help," before there was a wet squelching noise and she stopped. We immediately called 911 and our class instructors, who were quite horrified. We fled the room to one of theirs to wait it out. When the police got there, the room was empty except for apparently a lot of blood and drag marks to the door. They forced the entire class to get up and we immediately left and found a different hotel for the rest of the week. So needless to say, I've never willingly stayed in a roadway inn again. This is almost certainly the worst one I have seen in this thread so far, and that is saying something. Stayed in this motel a bunch of times as a kid. Always thought it was nice, mostly due to the truck stop burger place next to it. As an adult, took my wife there. It was a Motel 6. Not sure if it was a recent acquisition or if it had always been. And man, it was a shithole. The truck stop was still there, but the restaurant changed and was crappy. All kinds of problems with the room, but more or less par for the course with Motel 6. It's a crappy hotel chain. If you're not familiar, not sure they exist outside the US. What really tripped us out was the scratch marks on the door. In my wife's words, like a small animal or child tried unsuccessfully to escape. Goes without saying we will never stay there again. Sounds like the Motel 6 in San Bernardino, CA. Spent more than one night there as a young ski buff when places up the mountain were booked solid. Worst thing was the truckers right on the opposite side of the chain link fence from the motel, idling their diesels all freaking night long. My mom was traveling for work and sat next to a man, fellow business traveler, on the plane. They had a casual conversation and exchanged business cards. Later that evening she's in her hotel watching TV and gets a phone call from the front desk that her husband is here and they want to know if they can give him a key to the room. Turns out the creep on the plane was pretending to be her husband to try to get into her room. Well done front desk staff, calling her to confirm. When I was 20, I went to Ireland with my sister and uncle. Most of the trip we stayed in nice places, but the first night in Dublin we stayed in a rundown place where our door has crowbar marks on it. That night around 1 am, someone tried climbing in our window. We were several floors up. When confronted, the man apologized and said he thought it was his room. That's the Dublin I know and love. This one wasn't really the motel's fault. I stayed in a motel 9 hours away from the closest city in outback Australia as a single 20-year-old woman on veterinary school placements. A locust plague hit that night. Didn't think I was scared of insects, but it sure showed me. I remember finding them in the morning in places like inside the fitted light bulb and inside the kettle. Didn't stay the second night. You know how a single spider egg sac has like 1 billion babies? Yeah, motel in Southern Cali had spider eggs hatch and there was a moving carpet of 1.5 billion tiny baby spiders. The eggs were behind the TV. On the plus side, they probably ate the bedbugs. Stayed at a cheap holiday camp with my parents as a kid. The holiday itself was great because my parents made it fun. I remember the caravan being run down and the shower curtain being covered in at least 10 fat black spiders. A mama spider must have laid eggs in the bathroom and all the siblings grew up and never left. A mama spider must have laid eggs in the bathroom and all the siblings grew up and never left. I enjoyed this description, lol. There was a massive mirror that stretched the full length of the wall where the bed was. I could swear it was a two-way mirror. There was a crew on site filming a horror movie. It had an indoor pool that had plants growing out of it and you couldn't see through the water. Like something was going to come out and drag you in. Our door wouldn't latch. So in the middle of the night when the AC kicked on, the door popped open just enough to hear the chain lock snap. We got a call at 2 am from someone who kept asking how I was doing. His voice was very eerie and calm. He wouldn't change tone even after I was getting pee asking who is this. Later we thought it could have been a robocall and it just got stuck in a loop on the initial question. We had gotten in late and thought no big deal for one night. We were supposed to be there 3 nights. That didn't happen. I booked an Airbnb in North Shore, Oahu. I think it was $40 a night. There were bugs crawling out of a hole in the wall. I used to travel for work. A lot of stupid hotel stories. I was attached to an out-of-town crew in another region whose main hub was 2 hours away from the main shop and consisted of 2 other guys. So me and another guy, or just me, would travel to region. I was staying in a hotel in a different town that wasn't my normal one when with this crew. Anyway, I had basically been checked in by Norman Bates. He insisted on helping with my bags, even though I refused. Taking note, I was using duffel bags from the army. Bags I have because of National Guard. I was too cheap to buy different duffel bags and used the ones they supplied me. Him. These are army bags. Me. Yes. I was expecting the thank you for your service and was revving up the old thank you for the support reply machine. He caught me off guard. Him. Have you killed people? Me. No. Him. That's disappointing. He stood there and just stared for a minute. I finally asked him to leave and he did. I locked up and went to the job site. Got back at like 8 PM. Long day and was in no mood for weird crap. I was greeted with weird crap. Norman Bates standing at my door. I asked if he needed something and he just took off with a cleaning cart to a different room, which I found odd. Later that night, I was drinking a beer and playing OSRS when my doorknob turned about 6 times. I went to confront them and they were gone. I suspected Norman. I was sleeping later. I had forgotten to lock the second latch that acts as a doorstop if staff unlocks the normal lock. I wake up in the middle of the night. Norman is standing in the doorway. I freak out and start yelling, "Get the frick out, get the frick out, get the frick out." He instead walks into a shore. He heard loud thuds and was checking on all the guests. I pushed him out and locked the door again. Packed my stuff, loaded up, and drove 30 minutes to sleep at a rest stop in my truck. HR called me by lunch, demanding to know why the mother of the kid called, asking why I pushed out her autistic son from my room after telling him my glorious war stories, which was only half a truth. I lucked out and didn't get in trouble. Anyway, I stayed with my foreman and his family that week. His wife knew some of the family personally from high school and I guess they a family of majority creeps. They in recent years purchased and ran the hotel. Sounds like more than autism, for sure, or autism combined with generationally weird, creepy. A ski resort in Crare in the Atlas Mountains of Algeria, 1991. Algeria at the time was a top contender for worst hotels on planet Earth. The resort was no longer functioning with any regularity at the time. The hotel had once been nice. Algeria was like this. Some of the hotel infrastructure was colonial, but this particular one was built during one of the 5-year plans of the 70s and had never ever been maintained. From outside it was postcard pretty, if slightly shabby looking. I'd gone to see the Barbary apes. I knew it was going to be bad when I saw the ruined lobby, but how horrible could it be? Bad, it turned out. Representational paintings hung upside down. Who does this? I mean, they were not abstract. There were pictures of people and mountain scenes. How little must one care to hang them upside down? In the room, a massive infestation of bedbugs and cockroaches. Spoke to the profoundly indifferent manager. This was the only room available, although the hotel was empty, even desolate. Toilet wasn't functioning, says the manager. No running water for a long time. Door to bathroom closed. Stepped inside. This was a mistake. Years of dried excrement, human, piled into a little mountain range in the bone dry toilet. Additional, similar mountain ranges in the sink and shower. I suppressed my choke reflexes, went outside, evaluated. The manager just shrugged. Where do I go to the toilet? Wordlessly, he gestured at the balcony. Clearly people had just been squatting there for quite some time. Anyway, it wasn't warm, so I would keep the balcony door and window closed so as not to smell it. Too far to drive onwards. Icy roads and bandits. I went out to the car, got my tent, went back in the room, pushed all the furniture against the walls. This was reassuring to me as I pushed the bed against the bathroom door in case any of the monstrous filth there took life and decided to attack. Pitched tent in the middle of the room on the tile floor. Sprayed entire exterior of tent with Raid. I'd already traveled this area of North Africa and was familiar with the challenges. Zipped tent tightly after putting sleeping bag, foam pad, and zipped backpack inside. Walked down into the village. Bought bread to eat. There was nothing else. Back to the hotel. Toilet. Holding my nose and watching my step. On the balcony. Took off boots and clothing inside tent. Lots of insect and rodent noises all night, but I survived. The barbariates in the snow were quite interesting. By the way, at the time, just before the coup d'etat, Algerian hotels in rural areas were among the very worst I've encountered in over 70 countries. They were next level plus bad. The 8th circle of heck. The good news is that they were cheap. You win. Seriously, I have read this entire thread. Yours is the worst best. I stayed at a backpacker's place in Melbourne where the rooms were just partitions. If you stood on top of the bunk you could look down into the rooms around you. I would guess there were beds for about 40 people on each floor. It was pretty cheap though. This story takes place in 2004, in Kerala, India. I was backpacking at the time with an old girlfriend, and we had been on the road for about 4 months at this point, young and in love and completely enthralled by the subcontinent. We had been on a bus ride up from Tamil Nadu all night and were both looking forward to a shower. Found what seemed to be a decent hotel which promised hot water and, gasp, air conditioning for a price that was slightly out of our budget, but it was my birthday so we decided to splash out a little bit. Minutes after settling in, my girlfriend went to use the washroom. She closed the door and then let out a shriek and an expletive. I went to investigate and found a cockroach on the floor, which I promptly squished. I thought to myself, no big deal, what's a cockroach? 20 seconds later she calls me back. There's another roach scurrying around in there. Squash. Okay, love, go ahead, you're safe now. Rinse and repeat. 2 more of the uglies. Splat, squanch. I start investigating the bathroom a little bit closer as my GF is trying unsuccessfully to tinkle, and I notice what looks like sawdust on the floor just in front of the door jamb. The bottom of the bathroom door is also what looks to be water damaged and weakened. What came next still haunts me. I don't know why I did it. It was impulsive and rash, and I definitely did not think about the consequences of the action I was about to undertake. I stood up, took a step back and gave the bathroom door a hard kick. The lower 2 feet of the door disintegrated into a shiny writhing mass of thousands of cockroaches, which in their panicked and disturbed state immediately started jumping around the confined space that we were all occupying. It was like the air turned black with the bodies of these flying terrors, and the only way out of the bathroom was through the now halfway destroyed nest of a door that was dropping more and more roaches out of its hollowed out insides by the second. Honestly, it was a terrifying, harrowing experience. From the time of the big drop to the moment we fled the room, not more than 45 seconds could have elapsed, but bloody heck did it feel like an eternity. Needless to say, we got out of there, which took some time as all belongings were still inside a room filled with tens of thousands of nasties. Thank the maker we hadn't really begun to unpack our bags yet, or it would have been a lot more of a difficult move out of there. The mental image of that door disintegrating still gives me shivers down my spine. This is so awful. You're a great writer, and that image of thousands of roaches everywhere is freaking me out. Pull up and know it's going to be bad, but it's 11 PM. We're on our way home from a whirlwind trip, 900 miles each way. We go in, and the deluxe room is basically 2 rooms together and makes no sense. Front room is 2 beds that look like they have been exactly the same since 1983. Back room is 1 bed, the TV, and the bathroom. There's wooden dowels in the windows for security. The scent of both rooms is reminiscent of a 1978 home of an elderly widower. Our dog was with us. She sniffed everything like crazy, then just stood in the room. Wouldn't relax. I was pee and the husband knew it but was trying his hardest to convince us we'd make it one night. I was determined to sleep in the wooden chair. He tried the bed, tried getting our dog to lay with him, and she refused. After about 30 minutes he jumped up, said I can't do this, and we left. Ran out of gas halfway between there and our next destination. Waited 90 minutes in the middle of nowhere for AAA to bring us gas. Get to the next hotel about 2 AM and it's an amazing room for $20 less than the skeevy motel we abandoned. This reminds me of the hotel I stayed in around spring break back in college. It was outside the beach town. Since we booked a little late, being in the hotel was like going back to the 80s. The room wasn't bad but definitely had weird vibes. Extended stay of Raleigh near the mall. Dirty, not vacuumed or wiped down. The kitchen sink dripped the whole time. There were no towels or toilet paper. Had to buy my own after the front desk refused to hand any over. Microwave didn't have a plate inside. The sheets were stained yellow. Pictures had been ripped off the walls and left huge holes. The water was black when I turned it on. When I tried to change rooms I was told there were no other rooms available, and being too broke to go somewhere else, I sulked back to the room only to be woken up by fighting and police outside and a staff member knocking on the door a few days later asking how long I was staying. I have not received a response from corporate yet, but apparently they are closing this site down for lack of maintenance and basic human care. Thank God. Website was misleading. I actually know exactly where you're talking about. By Crabtree. I was staying the night in Mexico City after doing some paperwork in the German embassy. The plan was to take a tour through the city and go to theater at night. Around 4 PM me plus wife plus 9yo daughter, we were feeling tired and I suggested going to the hotel, cool out for a couple hours and head to the theater all freshened up. I booked a really cheap hotel that had breakfast included and was only 3 kilometers away from downtown. Overall it looked okay in the pictures, so why not? We took the subway to make it to the hotel and everything looked pretty normal until we reached our station and came back to the ground. The neighborhood was shady as frick. A street market filled with counterfeit goods was booming. Lots of people moving in all directions frantically. Lots of homeless, or at least they looked homeless. People drinking and taking drugs in the street, and I am by no means scared of addicts or drugs, but the sheer amount of zombies passing us by was scarring. I jumped into survival mode and walked as fast as I could looking for the safest place to take refuge whilst looking in my phone where the frick the hotel was, as I didn't want us to look more as outsiders tourists as we already looked. A chain drugstore appeared in my view and I head over there sprinting through this crap hole. I didn't want my wife and daughter to realize how nervous I was, but they surely were as scared as I was. I bought a couple water bottles in the drugstore to justify our presence there and meanwhile checked how far our hotel was. It was around 5 blocks and I was willing to walk those streets again. Across the corner heavy traffic was running. Lots of buses and taxis passing by. I didn't want to take a cab off the street because they can be dangerous as frick also, but I thought it was my best choice and gave it a shot. Every taxi that came by was fastly taken and spent 5 minutes trying to get till we succeed. I gave the address to the driver and he told us that it was a short drive and that he knew the place. He then proceeds to ask us, "Have you already stayed there before?" As soon as I heard that I knew it has been a good choice, the one I made when booking this hotel. I said no and proceeded to ask him why he'd asked. He told that the whole neighborhood is really dangerous. This hotel we are staying in is basically a crack and W house and that he thought it was no good idea for us to be there. He said that we stood up really fast as tourists and we could be friends easily targeted. Furthermore, he said that a couple blocks away heavy drug trafficking was dealt 24/7. At that moment I didn't know what to do. I knew we weren't gonna stay in this crap hole, but I was also scared the taxi driver would rip us. I told him to leave us back in the subway station and he did. He was a really cool guy that really saved us being robbed or worst. We stayed in a McDonald's till showtime, then went to the theater and took a bus back home after that. My then boyfriend, now husband, and I stayed at a Motel 6 in northern Florida. We were young and broke and just wanted a place to sleep for the night before driving back home from a trip. They allowed no early check-ins, which is fine, understandable. But as we waited in the car, we definitely saw some characters. We finally got checked in and the room was horrible. It smelled bad, bathroom was disgusting, and the sheets had a few stray pubes in them. Husband decided we'll take a nap here, and then just power through and go back home. We slept on top of the sheets instead of in them. Except we slept all of 10 minutes before there's knocking at our door. Husband opens it, it's a kid with toys who starts crying as soon as she sees him. "You're not my daddy, heck nope." Closes the door. 5 minutes pass. Now there's 2 kids knocking and crying. "Where's my daddy?" "Nope, nope, nope." I packed our crap up in the car and he returned our key to the front counter. The lady didn't give a frick or act like what happened was out of the ordinary. She told my husband, "You could have just left the key in your room." And now he refuses to stay anywhere with less than 4.5 star reviews. Wife and I stayed in a Motel 6 during a cross-country move. Everything we owned was in the U-Haul parked in the lot. Room was filthy, floor was crunchy, no towels, smelled like musty magazines and cigarette smoke. I stayed awake as long as I could. Wife wouldn't drive the U-Haul, trying to keep an eye on our worldly possessions, but must have dozed off. About 3 AM someone knocked on the door. I bolted up and the door has half opened before I woke up. Some dude stood there swaying. He looked really surprised to see me, asked to bum a cigarette, told him to frick off, and he left. I was on a work trip and we were stopping at several places in the Caribbean. Most were very nice, that is, until the last stop. It definitely looked like more of a motel, but that's fine I think. We get inside the lobby and it definitely looks run down and dirty. Well, it's one night, right? The lady working the lobby walks me to my room, opens the door, and starts to walk back to the lobby. I step 1 foot inside and a cockroach big enough to ride goes galloping across the room while I scream bloody murder. I'm terrified of bugs. The lady comes running back thinking I'm being murdered. I get a different room, but honestly it's not much better. I spend the night sitting awake in the middle of the bed on watch. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.